So again, our topic is taking account of sociological knowledge and asking how this could help us guide reforms to the legal system. And if we wanted to equalize legal outcomes, how could we do it? And our starting point is the assumption that case structure is going to have this influence on the way cases are handled. And it always has this sort of predictable influence of higher status cases get more law, downward cases get more law, more distant cases get more law. And you can't necessarily just wish those patterns away. They seem to persist even in legal systems where the written rules say these things shouldn't matter. But one way we could try to minimize the effects of these factors and make sure that cases get handled similarly, regardless of the relationships and statuses of everybody involved, is to exclude social information. In other words, we hide the case structure from the legal process. And this won't totally eliminate all the effects that case structure has. For example, rich people could still hire better lawyers. But it could reduce the influence of these social characteristics on decisions made by judges, juries, prosecutors, and other legal officials. So desocialization of law is a strategy of legal reform that tries to reduce the impact of case structure by hiding the case structure from legal officials. Another potential option would be to actually change the case structure. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about sociological litigation, how lawyers or other motivated parties might try to shape the cases to get an outcome favorable for their side. Or we could also try to shape the cases in a way that equalizes the outcomes across cases. So if the basic problem is that different cases get handled differently when they have different social structures, one way we could equalize outcomes is to make the social structures more equal. The example Black gives of this strategy is what he calls the Incorporation of Law, and this takes account of the advantage that corporations have in court against individuals. Now, usually when you talk about inequality in modern society or proposals to equalize society, people always focus on wealth and the distribution of wealth. And if we want to make society more equal, we got to redistribute wealth in different ways. Less often recognized is what a powerful form of status organization is, and it's one of the greatest sources of inequality in modern life. Most of us interact with the world as individuals on our own. We don't even really have the extended family units that people used to depend on in the olden days. We move around, we go to new places and new towns, and for most of our existence, we deal as individuals with the various institutions around us. But we're surrounded by these powerful organizations, everything from universities and state and federal governments to all the corporations we interact with and buy products from and depend on for services. And as we've talked about, there's lots of research showing that organizations have a massive advantage in the courtroom. They bring more lawsuits and they win lawsuits at much higher rates. Organizations are more successful when they sue individuals, and individuals are least successful when they sue organizations. And so one way to try to reduce the impact of organizational inequality on law would be to reduce organizational inequality altogether. Try to get people more organized so that they don't go into the legal system as lone individuals, and if they do have to face a corporation in court, they're facing it as part of an organization themselves. And so basically this is a way of leveling the playing field and bringing a kind of social equality to the cases in the legal system. And Black proposes this potential reform called a legal cooperative association. Basically, you make these associations that act as kind of a cross between a mutual aid society and an insurance system. And you have an association of several hundred or several thousand people who have each other's backs, legally speaking. And so whenever a member needs to bring a case to court, it's the association that brings the case on behalf of their member. So it's the case being brought by the association, not by the individual. And if the individual gets sued, then the association represents them in court, and everybody kicks in some sort of monthly fees, and those go to pay out lawyer fees or to pay for compensation if the person gets ordered to pay compensation in court. So these legal cooperative associations, if they were created, could help equalize outcomes by making everybody part of an organization for litigation purposes. If you needed to file a lawsuit or defend yourself against a lawsuit, you'd have an organization you were part of that would bring the suit or defend you against the suit and would help pony up the money for lawyers' fees and compensation and things like that. And if you won compensation, well, you could share it back to the group and disperse it among the other members as a payback for them helping you win the suit. And you could also have all kinds of internal rules for these organizations to govern them. Like maybe, you have a rule about repeat offenders. If somebody in your organization just seems to be lawsuit bait, like they keep getting in trouble and they're costing your organization a lot of money, you could threaten to kick them out. And that might be a powerful form of social control in its own right, to be expelled from your legal co-op. That might induce people to obey the law more often. Another advantage of the legal cooperative association would be it would tend to mask other status characteristics. If it's a legal cooperative association bringing the case or defending against the case, then that might hide the social characteristics of the individual involved who's the target of the grievance or the one bringing the grievance. So it might matter less whether they're black or white or rich or poor or whatever if it's the organization as such, and the organization is people of different backgrounds and classes and races and so forth. Though you still might also see the problem of, community A is a poor community, and their legal cooperative association has a reputation as being the low status association, and the rich community has a much better association that's high status, and that kind of thing. So this wouldn't eliminate all those kinds of inequality, but it might reduce their effects, and it would certainly reduce the disadvantage individuals have when they face organizations. The broader idea of creating new legal organizations designed to help people and either camouflage or overcome some of their own low status characteristics has already been applied to something like charitable bail funds. So in certain jurisdictions in America, including New York, they've created charitable bail funds that pay people's bail. And the idea behind these funds is that judges often set very high bail, and people who can't afford to pay this high bail have to stay in jail until their trial. And trial sometimes might take 2 or 3 weeks from the time you're arraigned. And if you can't afford to spend 2 or 3 weeks in jail, you just plead guilty at a plea bargain in order to avoid jail time and go home. And so you have lots of people who are pressured into pleading guilty because they lack the money to pay their bail and wait for a trial and try to prove their innocence. And so some people have tried to compensate for this inequality by creating charitable bail funds that pay people's bail and allow them to get out of jail and then potentially, wait for trial and fight their case. And if they show up in court after the trial, they get the bail back and they can pay the fund back. And the organizers of the fund claim that this works for the most part, and they lose very little money because people who take advantage of this fund tend to show up for trial and tend to pay back their bail. And the organizers of this fund have information posted online for how to try to establish such a fund in other jurisdictions.